Every Christmas, someone knocks on a door somewhere in the world, and shortly after, someone else vanishes without a trace. This isn't just a spooky campfire story. It's a chilling pattern that has been documented for over a century, a whisper in the annals of unsolved mysteries. They call him the Christmas caller, a figure as elusive as he is terrifying. The stories all begin the same way. A family is celebrating, the house is warm and full of light, and then, a single, sharp knock at the door. Not a festive, friendly rap, but a knock that feels out of place. When the door is opened, there's a man standing there. His description is strangely consistent across decades and continents. He's tall, dressed in a simple, old-fashioned dark coat, often dusted with snow, even in places where it never snows. His face is described as pale, gaunt, and unsettlingly calm. He never forces his way in, he just asks a single, simple question. Sometimes it's for a glass of water, sometimes for directions to a street that doesn't exist, or sometimes he simply asks if he can warm himself by the fire for a moment. The people who answer the door are always kind. It's Christmas, after all, they let him in. He stays for only a few minutes, never speaking much, his eyes scanning the room as if looking for something or someone. He then thanks them politely, turns, and leaves, vanishing back into the night. The family feels a strange chill, a sense of unease they can't quite shake. But the festive mood soon returns, and the incident is almost forgotten, almost, because the next morning, or sometimes a few days later, they realize someone is gone. It's never the person who answered the door. It's always someone else who was in the house that night. A child, a grandparent, a visiting cousin. There's no sign of a struggle, no broken locks, no ransom note. They are simply erased. It's as if they were never there. Police investigations hit dead ends. The trail is always cold. The only common thread is the memory of that strange visitor, the man in the dark coat who knocked on Christmas night. Let us dive into one of the most famous cases, the disappearance of 8-year-old Lily Anderson in 1953 from a small town in Vermont. The Andersons were having a lively Christmas Eve party. Snow was falling heavily outside, blanketing the world in white. Around 9 o'clock, a knock came at the door. Lily's father, Tom, answered it. He later told police about the tall man in the dark coat who asked for shelter from the storm for just a moment. Tom, feeling the spirit of the season, let him in. The man stood by the fireplace, his back to the room, steam rising from his damp coat. He didn't say a word. After about 5 minutes, he turned, nodded at Tom, and left. The party continued. Lily, who had been playing with her new doll in the corner of the living room, was put to bed shortly after. The next morning, Christmas Day, Lily's bed was empty. The window was locked from the inside. The snow outside was pristine, with no footprints leading away from the house except for those of the family. Lily Anderson was never seen again. Decades later, in 1988, halfway across the world in a quiet suburb of Sydney, Australia, the story repeated itself. The Harrison family was enjoying a Christmas barbecue in their backyard. It was a scorching hot day. A knock came at the front door. Mrs. Harrison answered. It was a man, tall and pale, wearing a heavy, dark winter coat, looking completely out of place in the Australian summer heat. He didn't seem to be sweating. He asked for a glass of water, which she gladly gave him. He drank it, thanked her, and left. That night, their 17-year-old son, Daniel, who had been at the barbecue, went to a friend's house and never arrived. His car was found abandoned on the side of the road, keys in the ignition, his wallet on the seat. There was no sign of him, the only connection. The bizarre visitor in the winter coat, Mrs. Harrison, years later in an interview, said the most haunting thing was his eyes. They were old, she said, older than anything I've ever seen. So who is this Christmas caller? Theories abound, each more fantastic than the last. Some paranormal researchers believe he's a psychopomp, a guide of souls, who appears on a night traditionally associated with spirits and miracles to collect a destined soul. Why the knock? Why the charade? Perhaps it's a rule he must follow, a ritual that requires him to be invited in, a strange cosmic courtesy before he takes what he came for. Another theory frames him as a time traveler. Could he be plucking people from the timeline for some unknown purpose? Maybe he's correcting a paradox, or recruiting for a future war, or saving them from a fate we can't comprehend. This could explain why he appears in different eras and locations, and why the person who disappears is never seen again. They've been literally removed from our time. His old-fashioned clothing could be a kind of temporal camouflage, neutral enough to not be too jarring in any recent century. A more folkloric explanation paints him as a fae creature or an ancient being bound by old magic. In many old legends, entities like the fae cannot enter a home uninvited. The act of letting him in seals a pact, an unknowing trade. You give him entry, and he takes someone in return. Christmas, with its themes of open hearts and open doors, becomes the perfect hunting ground for such a creature. The person taken is a tithe, a payment for the brief hospitality shown. Could there be a more rational explanation? Skeptics have tried. They suggest a highly sophisticated, multi-generational kidnapping ring that uses a clever psychological trick. The Christmas caller is a distraction, a piece of theater designed to confuse witnesses and throw police off the scent. While the family is focused on the strange man at the door, an accomplice could be entering the house through another point, carrying out the abduction silently. The consistent description could be a deliberately crafted persona, passed down through the organization. But this theory has holes. How could such a group operate for over a century without a single leak, a single mistake? How could they leave no physical evidence, no footprints, no fibers, no witnesses to the actual abduction? The sheer logistical challenge of coordinating these events across the globe, year after year, with such flawless execution, seems almost as unbelievable as the supernatural explanations. What's truly terrifying is the pattern's precision. It's always Christmas, it's always a knock. It's always a quiet, brief interaction, and it always results in a disappearance. The stories are separated by decades and oceans, passed down through families and collected by 14s and mystery enthusiasts. There are no bodies, no ransom notes, no answers. Just a void where a person used to be, and the lingering, chilling memory of a stranger at the door. So this Christmas, when you're gathered with your loved ones, surrounded by warmth and light, and you hear a knock at the door, you might just hesitate for a second. You might wonder who is out there in the dark. Is it a carol singer, a neighbor with a gift, or is it someone else? Is it the Christmas caller, ready to ask a simple question and change your life forever? These stories serve as a powerful reminder that even during the brightest of seasons, there are shadows that linger. Mysteries that defy explanation and tap into our deepest fears of the unknown and the loss of those we love. Thank you for joining me on this dive into the chilling legend of the Christmas caller. If you have stories or theories of your own, share them in the comments below. Stay safe and have a very watchful Christmas. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more explorations into the unknown. Have you ever spent a major holiday completely alone? Not by choice, but because circumstances just sort of pushed you into it. Last Christmas, that was me. I stayed home, all by myself, on Christmas night. And let me tell you, I regret it more than I can say. Today, I want to share that story with you. Not for pity, but because I think there's a powerful lesson in it for all of us, especially when we feel isolated. It all started a few weeks before Christmas. Usually, my family has this huge, chaotic get-together. It's loud, it's messy, and it's full of love, but last year, everything was different. My parents had decided to take their dream trip to see the Northern Lights, something they'd been planning for years. My sister and her family were visiting her in-laws on the other side of the country, and my closest friends all had their own family traditions to attend to. The invitations were there. Of course, you can come with us, my sister said. Are you sure you don't want to tag along with a friend? My mom asked, concern in her voice, but I stubbornly said no. I told them, and myself, that I wanted a quiet Christmas. I had this romanticized idea of what it would be like. I pictured myself curled up by a twinkling Christmas tree, a classic holiday movie playing, a mug of hot cocoa in my hands, just enjoying the peace and quiet. It sounded perfect, like something out of a Hallmark movie. I thought, this is my chance for a stress-free holiday. No travel, no obligations, just me and my cat. I was actually looking forward to it. Oh, how wrong I was. Christmas Eve was actually okay. I did my last-minute gift wrapping for the presents I'd send later. I listened to carols, and I made myself a nice dinner. I felt independent and a little bit smug, thinking about everyone else rushing around in a holiday frenzy. I went to bed feeling pretty good about my decision. The real test, the thing I wasn't prepared for, was Christmas Day itself. I woke up on Christmas morning, and the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not a peaceful silence, but a heavy, empty silence. My phone buzzed with Merry Christmas texts, and I saw social media posts filled with families opening presents, laughing around a dinner table, wearing matching pajamas. Each picture felt like a tiny little jab. I tried to shake it off. I told myself, this is what you wanted. Remember, peace and quiet. I made my special Christmas breakfast, put on my favorite holiday playlist, and tried to get into the spirit. But nothing worked. The food tasted bland. The music felt hollow. I looked at the beautifully wrapped presents under my tiny tree, presents I had bought for myself to make it feel more festive, and I just felt pathetic. The joy, the magic, the warmth I associate with Christmas was completely absent. It was just another day, but worse, because it was a day that was supposed to be special. As the day wore on, the loneliness started to creep in and settle deep in my bones. It wasn't just being alone, it was the feeling of being completely disconnected. It felt like the entire world was celebrating together in one big, warm house, and I was outside, looking in through a frosted window. I tried calling my family, but with the time difference and their own celebrations, our conversations were short. They were happy, and I didn't want to bring them down by telling them how miserable I actually was. So I just said, everything's great, so relaxing, and hung up, feeling even more isolated than before. The peak of my regret hit on Christmas night. This was the time my family would usually be playing board games, telling old stories, and laughing until our sides hurt. Instead, I was sitting on my couch, scrolling endlessly through my phone. I had my fancy meal, the one I'd planned so carefully, but I barely tasted it. The movie I put on was just background noise to the loud thoughts in my head. I realized that Christmas isn't about the decorations, or the food, or even the gifts. It's about connection, it's about shared experience. And I had actively chosen to remove myself from all of it. I started thinking about all the opportunities I had turned down. I could have been with my sister, even if it meant a long flight. I could have joined my friend's family dinner, they would have welcomed me with open arms. But my pride, and my foolish idea of a perfectly peaceful holiday, had stopped me. I was so focused on avoiding the stress that I ended up avoiding the joy, too. The silence I had craved turned into a deafening roar of loneliness. That night was one of the longest of my life. I went to bed early, just to make it end. And when I woke up the next day, on Boxing Day, it felt like I could finally breathe again. The world was back to normal. The intense pressure to be joyful and connected was gone. And I made a promise to myself right then and there. I would never, ever do that again. So why am I telling you all this? Because I think we sometimes undervalue the power of human connection, especially during times that are meant to be communal. It's easy to think that being alone is a sign of strength or independence. And sometimes it is. We all need solitude. But there is a huge difference between choosing solitude and finding yourself in a state of profound loneliness. What I learned from my lonely Christmas is that it's okay to need people. It's okay to say, yes, I'd love to join you. It's okay to be vulnerable and admit that you don't want to be alone. My regret isn't about what I did. It's about what I didn't do. I didn't reach out. I didn't accept the invitations. I didn't prioritize connection over my idealized version of peace. That experience changed my perspective entirely. This year, you can bet I'll be on the first flight to wherever my family is. I'll embrace the chaos, the noise, and every single moment of togetherness. If you're ever facing a holiday alone, and you have the choice, I urge you to reconsider. Reach out to a friend, accept that awkward invitation from a coworker. Go to a community event. Pushing past that initial discomfort can lead to warmth and connection you didn't even know you were missing. My lonely Christmas was a painful lesson, but it was a valuable one. It taught me that the greatest gift we can ever receive is the presence of others. Don't make the same mistake I did. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever had a similar experience, I'd love to read about it in the comments. Let's share and support each other. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories. See you next time. Christmas, twinkling lights, the smell of pine and gingerbread, families gathered around warm fires. For most people, it's a time of joy. For me, a security guard at the long-abandoned St. Jude's Children's Hospital, it was just another shift. But this Christmas Eve was different. It was the night something followed me home. The hospital was a skeletal giant against the snowy landscape, its windows like vacant eyes. My job was simple: walk the perimeter, check the doors, make sure no one broke in. The city had plans to demolish it in the new year, but until then, it was my lonely domain. I started my rounds just after 10, the only sounds being the crunch of my boots on fresh snow and the distant chime of church bells. The silence inside St. Jude's was a living thing. It was heavy, pressing in on you. The air was cold, carrying the sterile scent of antiseptic that clung to the walls like a ghost. I moved through the deserted hallways, my flashlight beam cutting a nervous path through the darkness. Peeling paint, overturned gurneys, and the faint, unsettling outlines of cartoon animals on the walls of the pediatric ward. It was creepy on a good day. On Christmas Eve, it felt sacrilegious. That's when I first heard it, a soft, rhythmic sound. Thump dot 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 thump dot 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 thump. It was coming from the floor above the old maternity ward. My heart hammered against my ribs. Vagrants, I told myself, kids looking for a thrill. I radioed it in, but my supervisor, Dale, just laughed. Probably just the pipes, kid. The old place groans a lot. Merry Christmas. I wasn't so sure. The thumping was too regular, too deliberate. Against my better judgment, I decided to check it out. My footsteps echoed as I climbed the concrete stairs, my breath pluming in the frigid air. The maternity ward was even colder than the rest of the hospital. The air felt thick, heavy with a sorrow that time couldn't erase. My light swept across rows of empty cradles, their paint chipped and faded. And that's when I saw it. In the center of the room, one cradle was rocking. Back and forth, in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. Thump dot 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 thump dot 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 thump. It was the source of the sound. I froze, my throat tight. The cradle was empty. There was no draft, no one else in the room. It was moving on its own. I backed away slowly, my hand trembling as I reached for my radio again. But before I could press the button, the rocking stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the sound itself. I didn't wait for an encore. I turned and ran, not stopping until I was back in my small security booth by the main gate, heart pounding, sweat beading on my forehead despite the cold. I spent the rest of the night huddled in that booth, jumping at every groan of the old building, every whisper of the wind. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, a holiday-fueled case of the creeps. When my shift ended at dawn, the sight of the rising sun felt like a resurrection. I practically sprinted to my car, eager to get home to my small apartment, to the warmth and safety of my own space. Driving home, the city was peaceful, blanketed in a fresh layer of snow. Christmas morning was dawning. I started to relax, the tension from the night slowly draining away. I chalked it up to an old, settling building and an overactive imagination. I got home, locked the door, and collapsed onto my couch, completely exhausted. The last thing I remember before drifting off to sleep was the comforting silence of my apartment. I woke up a few hours later, disoriented. Sunlight streamed through my window, glinting off the little plastic Christmas tree I'd set up on my coffee table. It took me a moment to realize what had woken me up, a sound, a soft, rhythmic sound. Thump, thump, thump. It was coming from my bedroom. My blood ran cold. I sat up, every muscle tensed, straining my ears. There it was again. Thump, thump, thump. It was a sound I now knew intimately. It was the sound of a rocking cradle. I live alone. I don't own a rocking chair, let alone a cradle. Slowly, shakily, I got to my feet. The short hallway to my bedroom seemed to stretch into an impossible length. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of the apartment, and never look back. But I had to know, I had to see. I crept to the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. Peeking through the crack, my breath hitched in my throat. The room was just as I'd left it, except for one thing. In the center of the floor, where there had been nothing before, was a cradle, an old, wooden cradle with peeling paint. It was identical to the one from the hospital, and it was rocking. Back and forth, thump dot 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 thump dot 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 thump, a low wail, thin and reedy like a distorted recording, began to emanate from it. It was a sound of pure misery, a sound that didn't belong in this world. I couldn't see what was inside the cradle, and I didn't want to. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that whatever was in that cradle, whatever I had disturbed at St. Jude's last night, had followed me home. I stumbled back, my mind screaming. I fumbled for my keys, my phone, anything. The wailing grew louder, more desperate, filling my small apartment with an ancient sorrow. I didn't even grab my coat. I threw open my front door and bolted into the hallway, down the stairs, and out into the blinding Christmas daylight. I never went back. I left everything behind: my clothes, my furniture, my pathetic little Christmas tree. I called my landlord from a payphone and told him I was breaking the lease, that he could keep the deposit. I didn't give him a reason. How could I? It's been years since that Christmas. I moved to a different city, found a different job. I try not to think about it, but sometimes, in the dead of night, when the house is quiet, I hear it. A faint, distant sound on the edge of my hearing. Thump, 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 and I know it's still looking for me. A lonely, forgotten thing that just wants to come home for Christmas. So if you're ever working a lonely shift on a holiday, be careful. You never know what might follow you home. Thanks for listening. The first Christmas after my dad passed away was a quiet one. It was just me, Mom, and my little sister, Maya, trying to keep the holiday spirit alive in a house that felt too big, too empty. We did our best. We put up the tree, hung the stockings, and even left out a plate of cookies and a glass of milk for Santa. Maya was only 7, and Mom and I were determined to make it special for her, no matter how much our own hearts ached. That Christmas Eve, I had trouble sleeping. The silence of the house was heavy, punctuated only by the whisper of the wind against the window panes. I tossed and turned, the familiar comfort of my bed feeling alien. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, a soft thud from downstairs. My first thought was that our cat, Patches, had knocked something over. But then came another sound, a slow, dragging noise across the living room floor. It sounded heavy, too heavy for a cat. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. I slipped out of bed, my feet cold on the wooden floor, and crept to my door. I cracked it open just enough to peek out. The hallway was dark, but a strange, flickering red light was coming from the bottom of the stairs. It pulsed like a weak heartbeat, casting long, distorted shadows up the wall. With it came a smell, something I couldn't quite place. It was like burnt sugar and pine needles, but with an undercurrent of something else, something metallic and vaguely rotten. I thought about waking Mom, but a strange curiosity, mixed with a chilling dread, pulled me forward. I tiptoed to the top of the stairs, my hand gripping the railing, so hard my knuckles turned white. I peered down into the living room. The source of the red light was our Christmas tree. The fairy lights were off, but a single, large, crimson orb pulsed on one of the branches, bathing the room in its eerie glow. And then I saw him, standing by the fireplace, his back to me, was a figure in a red suit. It was Santa Claus, but something was terribly wrong. He was tall, far too tall, his head nearly brushing the ceiling. His shoulders were unnaturally broad, and his movements were jerky, disjointed. He wasn't placing presents under the tree, he was rearranging them. Slowly, methodically, moving each brightly wrapped box just a few inches, as if measuring something, the dragging sound started again. It was coming from the sack at his feet. It wasn't a sack full of toys. It was burlap, stained and lumpy, and it writhed. Something was moving inside it. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. This wasn't Santa. The suit was right, the hat was right, but the thing inside it was a grotesque imitation. He slowly turned his head, not his whole body, just his head, at an angle that a human neck shouldn't be able to achieve. The jolly white beard was there, but it was thin and patchy, matted with something dark. And his face, oh, his face, it was pale and waxy, like a department store mannequin, but his eyes were just empty, black sockets. There was nothing in them, no joy, no kindness, just a void. From his lipless mouth came a low, guttural clicking sound, like insects skittering over stone. He hadn't seen me. He was looking at the plate of cookies on the mantel. He reached out a long, bony hand, his fingers like white twigs tipped with yellowed nails. He didn't pick up a cookie, He picked up the glass of milk. He brought it to his face, and instead of drinking it, he just poured it over his head. The white liquid ran down his waxy cheeks, dripping from the matted beard onto the red suit, staining it. He made no sound, just stood there, letting the milk run down his face. My blood ran cold. I knew I had to get back to my room, lock the door, protect Maya, but I was frozen, trapped by a horror I couldn't comprehend. The thing then turned its attention back to the fireplace. It reached a hand up the chimney, its arm extending to an impossible length, further and further, until its entire arm was gone. There was a scraping sound from within the chimney, then a sickening, wet crunch. It pulled its arm back out. Its hand was covered in black soot and something thick and dark. It wasn't holding anything. It then knelt down beside the writhing sack. With a swift, sharp movement, it untied the top. I braced myself for what might come out, but nothing did. Instead, the thing reached inside, its arm disappearing into the sack's mysterious depths. The clicking from its mouth grew louder, faster, an excited, hungry sound. That's when I heard a floorboard creak behind me. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Maya. She was standing in the hallway, rubbing her eyes, a confused look on her face. "What's that noise?" she whispered. "Is it Santa?" Before I could answer, the thing downstairs whipped its head around, its empty sockets locking directly onto us. It had heard her. It let out a shriek, a sound that was 1,000 times worse than the clicking. It was a high-pitched wail of static and grinding metal that scraped at the inside of my skull. It scrambled to its feet with an unnerving, spider-like speed. It was coming for us. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Maya's hand and pulling her back towards my room. We slammed the door shut, just as a heavy thud slammed against it from the other side. I fumbled with the lock, my hand shaking so violently I could barely turn the key. Another bang, louder this time, splintering the wood around the frame. The thing shrieked again, its voice muffled but no less terrifying. Maya was crying, hiding her face in my side. "I'm scared," she sobbed. "What is that?" I didn't have an answer. I pushed my desk against the door, my body screaming with adrenaline. Bang, bang, bang. Each impact shook the entire room. The doorknob rattled violently. A long, thin crack appeared in the center of the door. Then, silence. The banging stopped. The shrieking stopped. All I could hear was Maya's quiet sobs and my own ragged breathing. I held my breath, listening. Was it gone? Did it give up? I crept towards the door, pressing my ear against the wood. Nothing. Slowly, carefully, I moved the desk and unlocked the door. I pulled it open a tiny crack. The hallway was empty. The horrifying red glow from downstairs was gone. The house was silent again, but this silence was different. It was heavy with the memory of what had just happened. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat with Maya, holding her until the first rays of morning light filtered through the window. When Mom woke up, we didn't know what to tell her. How could we explain the monster in the Santa suit? We just said we had a nightmare. When we finally gathered the courage to go downstairs, the living room was normal. The presents were neatly under the tree. The plate on the mantel was empty, and the glass of milk was gone. There were no stains on the carpet, no splintered door frame. It was as if nothing had happened, except for one thing. On the floor, right in front of the fireplace, was a single, long strand of coarse, white hair, matted with something dark and sticky. And Patches, our cat, was nowhere to be found. We never saw him again. Every Christmas Eve since, I stay awake. I sit at the top of the stairs, watching and listening. I don't know what that thing was, or what it wanted. I only know that it came to our house pretending to be Santa Claus, and I never, ever want to see it again. Some things are better left as stories, but I know what I saw, and I know it's still out there. So if you hear a strange noise on Christmas Eve, if the fairy lights on your tree flicker and die, don't go downstairs. Just lock your door and pray for morning. Thanks for listening. If you like this story, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more chilling tales. Stay safe. Every family has its Christmas traditions, right? For some, it's baking cookies. For others, it's caroling. For my family, it was arguing over which angel got to sit on top of the tree. But there was one tradition we never questioned, one that was as constant as the smell of pine in our living room every December. It was the hanging of the little glass soldier. He wasn't anything special to look at, just a small, hand-blown glass ornament, painted in a faded red and gold uniform. He had a tiny black mustache and two beady, black-painted eyes. My great-grandmother bought him in a dusty antique shop in the 1950s, and he'd been passed down through the generations. We always hung him last, on a prominent branch right at eye level, so his painted eyes could survey the room. We joked that he was the guardian of the presents, our own little nutcracker. We had no idea how right we were, or how wrong. The strange thing started subtly. I was maybe 10 years old when I first noticed it. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, parched, and tiptoe downstairs for a glass of water. And as I'd pass the living room, illuminated only by the twinkling tree lights, I'd feel it. A pair of eyes on me. I'd always stop and look at the tree, and my gaze would inevitably land on the little soldier. In the flickering, multicolored light, his painted eyes seemed to follow me. I'd tell myself it was just a trick of the light, my sleepy brain playing games. But it happened again and again. My younger sister, Chloe, noticed it too. One night she woke me up, her face pale. She said she saw the soldier move. His head, it turned, she whispered, her eyes wide. Just a little bit, but it did. I tried to comfort her, telling her it was a dream. But a part of me, the part that felt those eyes on me every night, wasn't so sure. We started calling him the Watcher. It was our secret, something the adults would just laugh at. As we grew older, the occurrences became more defined. Ornaments near the soldier would sometimes be on the floor in the morning, with no explanation. The delicate glass shepherd, the one that hung right next to him, was found one morning shattered into 100 tiny pieces. Mom blamed the cat, but our cat, Patches, was so old he could barely climb onto the couch, let alone up a Christmas tree. Chloe and I knew the Watcher didn't like having neighbors. The year I was 16 was when things truly escalated. It was Christmas Eve, the whole family was asleep, and I was up late, wrapping a last-minute gift. The house was silent except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the crackle of the dying fire. I sat on the floor, the colorful lights of the tree casting long, dancing shadows around me. And then I heard it, a faint, high-pitched scraping sound. Like glass on wood, I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I slowly looked up at the tree. The little soldier was there, in his usual spot. But something was different. He was facing the fireplace, away from me. I was certain, absolutely positive, that when we hung him up, he was facing the center of the room. I hadn't been drinking any eggnog. I was wide awake, my breath hitched in my throat. I watched, barely daring to blink, for what felt like an eternity. Then, with an agonizingly slow scrape, he began to turn. It wasn't a sudden movement, it was a deliberate, tiny rotation on his hook. His painted head swiveled inch by inch until his beady black eyes were staring directly at me. It wasn't a trick of the light this time. There was no flicker, no shadow play. He was looking at me. A cold dread, colder than any winter night, washed over me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I was just trapped, pinned by the gaze of a 2-inch glass soldier. He just stared. His expressionless, painted face was somehow more terrifying than any monster I could have imagined. I felt like he was seeing right through me, into my thoughts, my fears. After what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute, I scrambled to my feet, knocking over the wrapping paper, and bolted upstairs to my room, not looking back. I slammed the door and dove under my covers, trembling. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, Christmas Day, I crept downstairs, terrified of what I might find. The living room was bright with morning sun. The presents were all there, untouched, and the little glass soldier, he was hanging perfectly still, facing forward, exactly as we'd left him. It was as if nothing had happened. I tried to tell my parents, but they brushed it off as a bad dream, a product of late-night stress and too much sugar. Chloe believed me, though. I could see the fear in her eyes. From that year on, we refused to hang him. We told our mom he was old and fragile, and we were afraid he'd break. We carefully wrapped him in tissue paper and tucked him away in a small box at the very back of the attic, behind dusty photo albums and old furniture. Every Christmas, when we brought the decorations down, we both glanced towards that corner of the attic, a silent, shared understanding passing between us. Years passed. I went to college. Chloe got married. We moved out, started our own lives, our own Christmas traditions. The story of the Watcher became just that, a story. A spooky childhood memory we'd laugh about, though the laughter was always a little forced. Then, last year, my parents decided to sell the house. They asked us to come help clear out the attic. As we sorted through decades of memories, I found it. The small, dusty box. My hand hesitated before I opened it. Inside, nestled in the yellow tissue paper, was the little glass soldier. He looked exactly the same. His red uniform was still faded, his mustache still prim, and his beady black eyes still seemed to hold an ancient, unsettling knowledge. He was a part of my family's history, twisted as it was. I rewrapped him and put the box in with my own Christmas decorations, telling myself I was being sentimental. A few nights ago, while unpacking my ornaments, my hand brushed against that little box. A strange impulse took hold of me. Was it all just a child's imagination? Was I being ridiculous? With a deep breath, I unwrapped him. His glass surface was cold against my fingers. I found a sturdy branch, deep in the back of the tree where he wouldn't be too noticeable, and I hung him up. Just for a night, I told myself, just to see. I went to bed, feeling a familiar, childish anxiety. And sure enough, around 3 in the morning, I woke up. The room was dark, but a faint glow came from the living room. The glow of the Christmas tree. I lay in bed, my heart thumping, listening. And then I heard it, a sound I hadn't heard in over a decade. A faint, high-pitched scraping. Glass on wood. He's out there, on my tree. And I think he knows I'm awake. Thanks for watching. If you have your own creepy holiday stories, I'd love to read them in the comments below. Stay safe, and maybe check on your ornaments tonight. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more strange tales. See you next time.